have seen tremendous change. When I'm a third generation farmer, my grandfathers were here with the horse and carts, steam engines had left, and then post-war mechanization came into play, and actually it were incentivized as farmers to produce as much food as possible, and nature and lands, and biodiversity didn't really matter. We were paid and actually rewarded to remove much of the habitat away from our landscapes. But us, like many farmers nowadays, the picture on the bottom right, we're trying to farm in a more way with nature and more natural systems, and trying to bring soil health and food health back to the centerpiece of what we do. But many farmers are producing commodities more than just food. And it's about connecting to farmers, and farmers connecting to the food capacity they have. We can use lots of data nowadays to enhance our production, and the pictures on the left-hand side, we can measure our soil, where we can add nutrients and seed, and understand to get the most productive we can with the minimum inputs. The pictures on the middle of an arable farm, and sort of the yellow, the green is where the highest yield is, and the red is the lowest yield. So we can look at our fields and think we've got different opportunities, so we can grow grains in one part and vegetables in others. And then you have some biomass imaging on the right-hand side there. Sort of, we can look at from our crop health from the satellites, so we can really minimize the impact we have in our landscape with minimizing the impacts we have. And as an arable farmer, we're really starting to think about how we use our landscape. 62% of the grain we produce feeds livestock. Well, if we can reduce our meat consumption a little bit and move those livestock outside to fertilize our fields, then I can grow different crops and start growing vegetables and fruits alongside that cereal production. So the image on the left, you've got standard wheat and what is a heritage wheat. So it's a taller, more different species. And those heritage wheats have a lot better nutritional and plant health abilities. And in Cambridgeshire, we have some really large arable fields. We've amalgamated many fields. So now we're starting, like many other farmers, to put in strips for habitat in the middle of the fields to put more diversity in. That is really unlocking the opportunity of what we can do. So real food security really depends on nature and depends on our soil. So many farmers have been changing their establishment. The top left-hand picture is us ploughing soil, and then we're reducing that tillage, and then we moved right down to adding what they call a cover crop. So trying to keep roots and plants in the soil as much as possible to capture nutrients and sun energy and build organic matter. That helps us produce a different variety of crops and different things. And by focusing on cover crops and that soil health sees economic benefit and reduction in fossil fuel-based inputs. And that's really, really important if we're going to focus around sustainability for carbon and nature benefits. By transitioning our farming system and moving away from so much cereal production, we can introduce some livestock and better to fertilize our soil. We need manures to grow fruit, vegetables, and cereals. And we need to bring fertilizer either from animals or ourselves back into the soil system, and just do that in a really careful way that grows our fruit, vegetables, and cereals in a more productive way with minimizing fossil fuel-based inputs. So as a nature-friendly farmer, I'm passionate about farmers that can deliver connected landscape for nature, for climate, and for food production. And we can do the nature part, but we really need to focus around the food and availability in local communities. We've also noticed having more nature on our farms increase yields. So it minimizes the inputs we can put onto our farm, and we can get better, healthier food from our farmed landscapes. So on our own farm, this is a picture of our farm, and you can see all the different stripes. We're putting more strips into fields, dividing fields up. So we've not got large cereal production. We can look at those fields now, and we're looking at where we can put fruit and vegetable production within that landscape, and trying to work with local communities of how and where that supply chain fits. And part of what I'll be talking about in a little bit is how do we have that relationship? So as farmers, we can produce different things, but what's the supply chain? What does your customer base need us to produce that can keep it as sustainable and locally as possible? So in those strips, many people are starting to put in trees. So we can have agroforestry, adding fruit and nut trees within that landscape. So there's going to be an availability of an additional fruits and nuts in the autumn. And we start thinking about the seasonal availability of food and when it comes. So it really looking at how we can farming in like almost a 3D system. So we can have areas of cereals if we need cereals, and then we can have strips of habitat, and then we can put trees in there. So we're farming multiple crops within that same landscape. And as we produce, and find a labour source to pick the apples and the pears, and there's nuts on some of the fields that we were involved in, it's about where can that local market become available to us, and how do we build as farmers that relationship with the supply chain and yourselves to sort of join that together so we have more local seasonal availability of food and meet the demands and the supply that nature gives us from our landscape. So the real important thing is to think about is where can you reach out and connect with farmers. Many producers are looking at going online and looking at different opportunities. And there's some bits around cereal production, and we have some great local produce. You've got Glebe Farm up near Huntingdon doing oats and mueslis and alternative milks and oat milks, and you've got various flours and local mills. And it's telling the story, connecting what you're putting on people's plates and feeding people with where that food comes from and the positive impact that food choice and supply chain can have to our landscapes. And I think there's such an important opportunity to connect what farmers are doing with yourselves and the end consumer, and sort of celebrating that transition to more sustainable food production and systems that are really rewarding local production wherever possible. So as we've seen a number of farmers in the past specialize in crop production, many moved away from fruit and vegetables and specialized in cereals or just one or two crops. As we're seeing more diversity come back into our landscape and production, people are now looking at, in fact, many farmers are now looking at how do we grow fruit and veg and where's that supply chain and marketplace. And I think what we really want to be doing between us all is thinking the season or two ahead and what would you need next season so we can build that supply chain in. And as a UK farmers, we produce so little fruit and veg nowadays. So much of it is imported. And I was really pleased to see within that survey, lots of people looking out for labels and trying to get UK sourced where possible. And there's opportunities as we move forward is yourselves and others sort of highlighting what your need is and communicating through supply chains and food hubs and through local markets, what can we grow later this season and seasons ahead, and really trying to join that together and minimizing food waste. Over 40% of the food we produce gets thrown away. And actually, if we can understand the seasonality, we will find some weeks the weather makes crops grow faster. So that's the time to add some more of that on the plate. That's the time to do the special offer. And it's building those relationships with your supply chain so everybody is minimizing waste and making sure as much food as possible, and including that wonky fruit and veg, manage to get on your plate. There's nothing wrong with it, it just looks a little different. So as I mentioned earlier, many farmers are now looking at going online. There's a number of websites like the Big Barn and Farming UK, where you can find where the local farm shops are, where the local suppliers are looking to expand and looking for new opportunities. I think we all have to be proactive in understanding our food chain and understanding the relationship that has with the producer and the effect that can have on the landscape. Are you trusting supply chains and labeling systems that actually do the right thing? The labels like Fair to Nature and Leaf Soil Association, they're really kind of trying to make sure farmers are doing the right thing for nature and for food. And then you have Red Tractor and other labels that check for assurability and making sure things are okay, but maybe not always for that sustainability and for the nature-based opportunity within that. So I'd really encourage you to look online locally and then do a bit of searching and connecting to farmers as they come online and communicate to them, say, look, you're looking for whatever produce that will be. Have you got any now or this season? Could you have some next year? And many farmers are really looking at the opportunity to supply things in different ways. So we all need to support that shift to healthier diets and join up that opportunity to have that diet that has a positive impact on our landscape, but also understand sometimes we cannot produce that food product at the right time, and where is the nearest other opportunity of getting that. So we need some trading systems that deliver positive impacts in other countries and globally. Quite often, imported produce is produced at a different standard and will have different inputs put on them that is quite frankly illegal to use in the UK. So it's trusting labels and systems that deliver a positive impact, not just locally or in the UK, but globally. Through our food choices and supply chains, we can make positive differences and impacts. And that doesn't always have to mean an additional price, but it's just making sure we can clearly identify the different choices we have. And sometimes that might mean taking something off a menu and putting something else on and supplying something different. But by having that relationship with that supply chain, you can really start to build trust, responsibility, and understand the pressures that fit between it. And the shorter we can make our supply chains, the better the margin will be for everybody. Because for too long, our supply chains have got stretched. The risk of waste being tied up because of the poor communications really can lead us to challenges. So I'm going to come to the end because I'm really keen to have some questions and get into some discussions. So the network's free to join. There's opportunities on the website to see where local producers are and resources. So I'd encourage you to join and sort of get involved, but also connect with local hubs, local farming groups and clusters to start building those supply chains for the future, where we can clearly demonstrate as producers the quality of our produce, the positive impact it can have in our landscape for climate, nature and communities, and how that can be represented on the plates people serve within our county.